All right, last lesson on David. Can we remember any of or all of the key moments in David's life that we've gone over so far? Colby's not here to tell us all of them. Yeah, when he was anointed as the king over Israel, that was a key moment in his life. Haley. Yes, protecting his father's flock as a shepherd boy. What was it? Oh, killing Goliath. Yeah, the slaying of Goliath. It's a big moment in David's life. For sure. What? Yeah. You got your own mouth, woman. All right, yeah. Gathering and training of his mighty men is another one we went over. Yes, his response to great victory over Goliath. Yes, his twice refusal to lift up his hand against God's anointed king. Need more people here. Yes. His sin with Bathsheba. Yes. Not all great moments in David's life, but big key moments. Right. Yeah, that's something that was a lesson I thought was really interesting. I'd never really thought a whole lot about that. But God said no to David building the temple, but he did everything he could to help out his son who would build it. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3 more, I think. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, he's over there. That was definitely part of the lesson. We called it his avenging of the destruction of Ziklag, which is when he's in the Philistine land. His faith fails and he flees there, and the Amalekites come up from the south and destroy Ziklag, the city that they were living in, and they avenge the destruction of their city there. Then we had his tragic relationship with Absalom and his reaction to the death of Saul. So the last lesson will be something that David had a commitment to, a lifelong commitment to doing something. We have much evidence of it in Scripture. And what would that be? He wanted to build a temple for sure. He definitely wanted to, and he made a big effort to. It's amazing. You look at the materials that he gathered. The materials he gathered for the temple, it's just amazing. But even like the majority of his life, we have a lot of evidence in the Bible about, how do I put it? He committed himself to learning something and doing something. Started back when he was a shepherd boy. We touched on this a little bit. A whole book in the Bible that's right. Yeah, he loves the Lord for sure. Yeah, this is something he did Not did. Yeah, writing his commitment to pen and song. All right. We have the whole book of Psalms. He wrote over half, I believe, a little over half of the Psalms that we have in the Bible. And really, you think about it, it's pretty amazing that David. I mean, you read the Psalms and they're just powerful, powerful passages. And David wrote over half of those himself. And so turn to 2 Samuel chapter 23. Pastor was saying this morning that he and his brother were talking about the life of David on their trip, and that they said there could be like 40 key moments in David's life. And it's true. I mean, you have so much more to David's life than what we've gone over. These are some of the bigger things, but I mean, you have lots of stories in David's life. His relationship with Jonathan is a pretty exemplary friendship. You have David's, it's tied in with the story of Absalom, but anyway, coming back into Jerusalem there, leaving, fighting. Of course, his men, you have Mephibosheth in there. You have lots of stories in the life of David. But we'll look at this last one here, 2 Samuel chapter 23. Now these be the last words of David. David the son of Jesse said, and the man who was raised up on high, the anointed of the God of Jacob, the sweet psalmist of Israel, said, the Spirit of the Lord spake by me, and his word was in my tongue. And he goes on here. But it's interesting that this title is given to him, the sweet psalmist of Israel. So how did David obtain this title? All right, we read these stories and you get so accustomed to them, but I mean, this is a nation, okay? You picture yourself a nation. And I think a lot of times we think of, I know myself, you think of things that happen in the Bible as entirely spiritual. And it could be argued that everything is spiritually related in some way, shape, or form. But you have Israel, and not everybody in Israel, Israel is God's chosen people, but not everybody in Israel believes in the Lord. Not everybody is saved. You read through the Bible, and oftentimes Israel turns their back on God. And I mean, it's the Israelites that wanted Christ killed, crucified. And so you have this nation, it's a small nation, but still, I mean, David, one man, he gains this popularity as a young man. He has a reputation. If you remember, we looked at that when he's up and coming, just when Saul is troubled, and he has this reputation just as a young shepherd boy who, I mean, shepherds were not men of notoriety back then. They watched sheep. But David stood out. He had a reputation that he loved the Lord. He had a reputation of being a valiant man. He had a reputation of being skillful in playing. And it's really pretty amazing that David rises from the sheepfold to the hero of a nation. And he's given this title here, the sweet psalmist of Israel. And it had to be earned. You're not given a title unless, I mean, usually, with no reason. And so how did David earn this, so to speak? But the first thing would be that he committed himself to write. And I'm no musical expert, but I would venture to say that it's far easier to put music to words than it is to put words to music. Again, I'm no expert here. Pastor Kelly will probably listen to this and call me up and say, you're an idiot. But I would venture to say that most of the time the music or the words come before the music. In fact, if you look at a lot of these hymn writers, we read these hymn stories, a lot of times the words were there, and then either the writer of the song or a musical composer comes along and puts music to those words. So David had to commit himself to write. The Psalms are songs, but before the music came, we have the words. And, we don't have the music today. The words stay behind. The Lord saw fit to preserve his words. But David had to commit himself to that. And, again, this is an aspect of David's life I don't really think about a whole lot. But you read through the Psalms, and they're just so full of, just a wealth of knowledge. And of course, we know that he was inspired of God. But at the same time, God uses men that have a desire to be used of him. And he had to allow himself to be used of God. He had to set that time aside to write these things, to ponder these things, to meditate on these things, to make these analogies. He had to do it. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 25, verse 11, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver." All right, so it's just, you ever hear somebody talk? It's not too common today, but in years past, and you just think, wow, that was so well said. It was concise, to the point, relayed the message. It was very clear. And it's a beautiful thing. The Psalms are a beautiful thing. You have orators, great orators of the past. I think of, in recent history, Ronald Reagan was a great speaker. I remember we were required in college to listen to his radio broadcast, just these short, I think like 5-minute things. And he would get on the radio. Of course, I'm too young to remember this, but we had to listen to the recordings. And I remember thinking, this guy just brings all these, great complex, political issues, economical issues, even sometimes, even though I don't believe the man was saved necessarily, spiritual issues down to like kid level. Grade school. And he would put it in these short little concise paragraphs. And it's like, wow, he packed so much information into this small time frame in so few words. And it's a beautiful thing. But we've lost that. By and large, we have lost the art of speaking, the art of writing. And Corey and I were talking recently, and I actually showed him this video. This guy, it was a little comedy routine, and it was pretty impressive. But he said he was joking about how he's not smart enough today to read fairy tales to 16th century children. And he said, was it Shakespeare had a working vocabulary of, 34,000 words? And he said, you and I, common people today, have a vocabulary of like 3,000. Okay. Makes you feel pretty stupid. We have our forefathers who were just they were fluent in several languages, men of God who knew 6 and 7 different languages. You don't find people like that today. I've known 1 or 2 in my life, and usually they're weirdos. But really, they're just kind of strange, odd people. But they used to be normal. The Jewish children, learned. I can't remember. Don't quote me on this, but if I remember correctly, at one time I heard it was by the age of, I think, 12, they had the Pentateuch memorized. Genesis to Deuteronomy committed to memory by the time they were 12. And just we've lost this desire to learn, this desire to write, this desire to speak fluently, relay messages in a clear and concise manner. But David obviously had a knack for this. He worked at it. We don't know a lot about David's education, so to speak. His formal education, but obviously the guy had some knowledge about taking words and forming them into sentences that, completed thoughts and relayed messages well. And he used analogies. You read through the Psalms, and there's so many, Psalm 23 is classic, where he uses, he compares the Lord to a shepherd that, directs his flocks and watches his flocks and protects them. And just beautiful pictures like that. A well-worded story or poem can move a heart. It can change an opinion. You say, well, that's just emotional. No, not necessarily. Jesus Christ used stories. Jesus Christ was the master storyteller. You read parables. You read true stories that he told. And they convicted hearts. The truths that were in these stories convicted hearts. You see how Nathan the prophet comes to David and tells him a story to get a message across. And we've lost that today. I remember years ago hearing an evangelist speak on this, and he said, he stressed this point that stories can be so used, a well-worded story can be so effective. And he gave some examples. I don't remember them exactly, but how, children, I remember one a little bit of a girl who wrote her father a letter. Her father who was leaving this girl's mother, and she wrote him a letter and told a story. And it so, touched her dad's heart that he realized how wrong he was. And just a properly worded sentence or properly constructed story can be so effective. And, David writes these songs. You think of the songs that we sing in our hymn books, these old hymns, not the modern stuff, but these old hymns. And it's just so powerful. You read, who was it, Charles or Samuel Wesley? Which one was it that wrote, we sang a song recently, I don't know if Haley remembers, and Mrs. Bickford said he wrote that song the day of or the day after his conversion. And I'm like, it's just so biblically oriented. It's like, wow. And we don't have that today. But David committed himself to learning these things, the study of grammar, understanding word usage is important. And when you're in school and your teacher tells you, it's important, you're going to use this stuff someday. And I know I didn't take it seriously. And we've lost so many things that could be used of God because we didn't commit ourselves to learning and to doing our best, Corey. Right. Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, we're not right. We're not learners. I mean, by and large, there's going to be the exceptions, but by and large, we're not learners like we should be. We're not readers. We're not committed to improving ourselves in every way we can to better serve God. You read Charles Spurgeon's messages, and they're just so powerful. And it's on my mind lately because I've been working my way through a book on him, and he says that he rarely knew more than 24 hours in advance what he was going to preach on. And you read his messages, and it's like, how on earth could you come up with that in less than 24 hours? His Sunday morning messages, he says he would start studying at 6 p.m. on Saturday night. His Sunday evening messages, he would start at 4 in the afternoon, Sunday afternoon. It's like, how do you come up with that? But the guy was a voracious reader. I mean, just read and read and read and read. I can't remember what, 6 to 8 books a day and 6 to 8 hard, difficult books a week. In addition to the other, just make you scratch your head, like, how do you read And no doubt the man was gifted, but at the same time, he committed himself to learning, and it was just an overflow. When he preached, it was just an overflow of his learning. And I think David here is an example of that, where he commits himself to the study of God, his relationship with the Lord, and these psalms that come out of there, out of David's heart, are just an overflow of his learning. But he didn't have to write that down. He didn't. There's a lot of godly men that have been given talents, they've been given skills, they've been given a great mind, and when they die, it's gone with them. Because, it was never written down. It was never recorded in any way. And we have, Spurgeon's sermons today because he had a man writing his messages, and his wife printed them, sent out these books and thousands and hundreds of thousands of copies. But we would never know this man. We wouldn't have much information on him. We wouldn't have a glimpse into his mind and his heart for the Lord if we didn't have his messages, or somebody hadn't recorded that. And so David committed himself to write. And I think that's something we've lost today. And our children, that can be taught. That can be taught to our children as they grow. I'm thankful for, not that I'm great, but but I look at things I was made to do in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, up through high school even, writing book reports, writing summaries. I had a 5th and 6th grade teacher. She's actually from Boston area, and so she was big on the Northeast history and stuff. We read books. Some of them were a couple I remember, Carry On, Mr. Bowditch, and Johnny Tremaine, these books, and you read them. And she was, at the time I thought like, that's weird, because I'm from the Midwest. We're talking ships and maritime, blah, 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 and history. And I'm thinking, like, this is not. But I look back at that stuff now and I think, man, I hated. It was the least favorite part of my homework was we'd read a chapter and then write a summary on it. And it was like half a page. And I hated it. Look, now I look at it and it's like, really, like, it's not that big of an issue. Half a page of writing. But I hated it at the time. But I remember I got to college and one of our teachers said, I need you guys to read the chapter in this book. Obviously, it wasn't Johnny Tremaine or Carry On, Mr. Bowditch, but it was a teaching book. Read this book and summarize your thoughts. Write a summary. And I remember coming into class, handing in the work, and the teacher graded it, and he comes back to class and he says, all right, we got to have a talk. He's talking to the whole college class. And he had to explain to people, because not everybody grew up there, at this, at Fairhaven, they have a school and then a college. People come in from all across the states and even the world to go to Bible college. But he had to explain to people, and I remember it took several sessions of him explaining what a summary was, like what he wanted in. He didn't want, your thoughts on it. He didn't want, how it compares to the Bible. He's like, guys, read the thing and condense it. Just give me a few thoughts, give me the gist of the chapter. And it was difficult for these kids to wrap their mind around what exactly the teacher wanted. Not that they weren't doing their homework, but they just. And I'm thinking, guys, this is like 4th grade stuff. This is what I learned to do back, in grade school. But it's lost. The writing, the reading, it's lost. And we got to be careful not to, look at these things as little, because, words are the foundation for communication. And how can you teach effectively without knowing how to relay thoughts and ideas? How can a preacher stand in the pulpit and preach without knowing how to concisely, accurately relay thoughts and ideas? It's impossible. But David committed himself to the study of words and grammar and writing. All right, he also committed himself to a musical instrument. All right, what musical instrument did David master? The harp. All right. Publishing of the Psalms required somebody to play them. We don't know exactly today what they were like back then, but Psalms, they were sung. You read through even Exodus, when the Israelites are set free from bondage, they come out of Egypt and they're delivered from the Egyptians when the Lord wipes out the Egyptians in the Red Sea, and they sing a song of deliverance. And, in the story of, Deborah and Barak, they sing a song. There's songs that are sung. And, yes, you can sing without a musical instrument accompanying you. But the chances of you understanding, music and, having a great understanding of music without knowing some sort of instrument or learning some sort of instrument, at least the basics, having your mind wrapped around, are pretty slim. Music and instruments kind of go hand in hand. But David committed himself to this, and he wasn't just half-hearted about it. The Bible says he was cunning in playing. He was a skillful player on the harp. Oh, man. Every time I think of this, I think of Pastor. Oh, I wish I had a recording of him doing it. It was funny. We were talking one day, and he said something about the harp just seems like a feminine instrument, and he just, it was so funny to watch him. He's like, I just picture, and it's just, you do, without, you just think of it as kind of a soft, quiet, femmy, type thing. But really, where does that come from? Maybe modern society, with effeminate men that tend to prefer those things. But Dave, just because an instrument is soft and quiet doesn't mean that it's effeminate. And David masters the harp. And so he commits himself to this. And I thank the Lord for my parents, making me learn music when I was a kid. We had to remember 3rd and 4th grade, we had this teacher. She was the feared teacher of grade school. And I remember hearing horror stories about Mrs. Haiti in class and how mean she was and how, uncompassionate she was. And coming up through, I'm 1st, 2nd grade, and you hear the upper grade school kids, 3rd and 4th grade. She taught 3rd and 4th grade. And she had one eye. She had a glass eye. And she was in her, probably at the time, she was in her, 60s, or roughly, late 50s, early 60s, somewhere in there. And she had one glass eye. I can't remember how she lost her eye, but so the kids would kind of joke around about it, but they're like, yeah, you can get away with things in Mrs. Haiti's class, because if she's looking this way, she can't see out of this eye, so she can't see this half of the classroom. So if you're smart about it, you can get away. Let me tell you something. She saw better with that one eye than any teacher saw with two. You didn't get away with stuff in Mrs. Haiti's class, but she was a great teacher. She was a great teacher. I remember so many things from her class. And one of the things that we learned was the little, we called them flutophones. My wife, they call them recorders, the little doo-doo-doo, the stick with holes in it. And it was one of those things. We had music class once a week. And kids were so prone to forget their flutophones at home because we had to go home and practice during the week. And then because we only had it once a week, we would forget. We're 3rd and 4th graders. You really expect us to be scheduled. And, but she wouldn't take it as an excuse. We either got, if I remember correctly, she would give us options. If you forgot your flutophone, she would say, okay, you can either have a demerit or you can borrow mine. And she had this old yellow, they're supposed to be white, but this thing was yellow. was this old, yellowed plastic, and it had a half-broken mouthpiece on it, and it had dog's teeth marks on it. And she played that up to us. She's like, all right, you forget your flutophone. You can either have a demerit or you can borrow mine. But just remember, my dog chewed on that and oh man, I had to use that one time. And believe it or not, that thing played better than mine did. It sounded better. I was able to play it better, but it was like the fear of all the 3rd and 4th grade kids. Here's Mrs. Sadie's flutophone. And looking back, I'm thinking, yeah, like no doubt she washed that thing, like why were we so scared of it? But it's all in what's in your mind. But we learned music, and I'm thankful for that. Learning of music at a young age, and it's important because, again, it's one more thing that's being lost. Kids aren't learning music, kids aren't learning instruments, and David committed himself to learning a musical instrument. So we're going to have to stop right there. I didn't make it even as far as I thought I would. Imagine that. So we'll stop there, and then we'll pick up with the rest of this next week. Let's pray.